how do we know what we need in terms of our calories, and what are the factors affecting weight? Like the body composition is so much more than just weight, right? There's muscle mass, there's fat composition, there's every other thing, your water retention and those things. So yeah, can you help
Yeah,
us?
that's a really great question. And I love that you shared the thing about your food affecting your hormonal health, your period as well, because obviously that's something that most women have experienced or see in some way, shape, or form. So, for instance, see that very clearly in the research. If we over restrict foods, especially carbs also. And if we over exercise, often that leads to something which is called hypothalamic amenorrhea. Basically, your period stops showing up altogether. It just means that your body is so stressed from not receiving enough food, from overtraining, that it doesn't think that it's a safe environment to create a baby, and therefore it's not really having your hormones in a balanced way. That is often like the one extreme. The other extreme, of course, is also if people are of too high of a body fat percentage, if they're maybe not exercising at all, and then they might be estrogen dominant and kind of like more in that, maybe even with some symptoms of PCOS or endometriosis in that kind of area. So what we do find is that we don't want to be in an over or an extreme body fat percentage. We also don't want to be in a very low body fat percentage. So our hormones really like kind of that healthy slash normal range. And the same applies to exercise. So not over exercising, not being completely sedentary.
Welcome to your Wordless Podcast, the space where we redefine success, self-worth, and transformation. I am Nick Nieras, the soul-centered architect of transformation, helping you unlock your highest potential and build a legacy beyond limits. Now, whether it is self-mastery, career breakthroughs, or wealth creation, this is where change begins. Now let's dive in. What was it like growing up as a Lisa Franz?
Well, that's not a short answer to this question, I don't think. But yes, I am originally from Germany. As you said, my name is Lisa. I'm now 35 years old. I am originally from Germany. Haven't lived there in about 16 years, though. I moved to New Zealand for about 10 years. And for the last 6 years of my life, so since 2019, I've been digital nomading around the globe. I've been to 53 countries. I'm currently living in Bolivia, and so in South America. In terms of how it was growing up, even my childhood, I was not in Germany the entire time. My dad was a development worker for some time, so we lived in West Africa for a little while in a country called Burkina Faso. It's a smaller country, and in France for a little bit. We always traveled around a lot, so that was fun, and that was most certainly one of the reasons why I now also love exploring different cultures and just have a true passion and curiosity for life and exploring the world. And that, of course, also includes food. And I've also always found that food is not just nourishment for the body, but also emotional nourishment. Of course, it brings people together. It's very, very cultural. And so after a while, when I wanted to still like live and travel, and basically when I finished high school and stopped with my training routine and just didn't have as many routines anymore. I gained a bunch of weight because I was traveling around the world and started partying a little bit too much and enjoying life a little bit too much. And so I then tried to get rid of some of the weight that I had lost. And I went about that in various strategies because I did start my university degree of exercise science with a minor in nutrition and health promotion. And so I've always been interested in physiology. But my first professor there at university, she was very much like, okay, old school, let's cut out some fats, just everything low fat, and you'll lose some weight. And so that's what I did. And I lost a little bit of weight, but then I kind of stagnated. And then the second professor, she was very much into low carbs. So I started cutting out carbs as well. I just kind of layered that on top of the previous professor and lost a little bit of weight. But then, of course, I felt really restricted because I was basically just eating vegetables and protein, and really felt guilty when I ate carbs, when I ate something heavier in fats. And of course, that would restrict my travels as well. So fast forwarding through various other diets that I tried, like paleo and keto and whatever, I always found myself feeling really restricted and just wondering, like, there has to be a way that I can enjoy life, travel socially, enjoying good food also, and also love the body that I'm in, also thriving in terms of my performance physically, in terms of my performance mentally. And so I started digging a bit deeper, and eventually I just came across an article which was actually titled, it's an article that was written by a CrossFit athlete. Her name is Nicole Capurzo, and at the time I was very much into CrossFit, and so I read the article, and it was titled How Donuts Gave Me Abs and an 80 kg Snatch. And I was like, so for those of you listening who don't know what a snatch is, it's a very heavy lift.
Wait, what?
So I was like, I want all of this. I want to be strong. I want to have abs, and I want to eat donuts. So what is this article about? And in that article, she basically explained how, when we learn more about the laws of thermodynamics, so essentially just that means how many calories does your body actually need for the activity that you're doing, when you actually learn the scientific approach to that, as opposed to just cutting out a food group or time restricting or whatever else it might be. And when you learn that it also comes down to the right distribution of protein, carbs, and fats for your activity level, for your body, you can essentially eat everything. That means you can also have, a glass of wine at date night. You can also enjoy a little bit of a brownie when you go to your cousin's birthday. You can include bread in your breakfast, and you don't need to be terrified, because at that stage I was so terrified of like literally anything, because every diet was telling me something different. So I was like, okay, I feel so frustrated. I'm going to just give this a try and actually calculate how much I need, start weighing out my food and learning more about what's really in my food, what kind of calorie content is in the foods that I'm eating, so that I can give this an honest review. And it didn't take very long, probably about a month or two into it, I started noticing huge shifts, not just in the sense of my mindset, because I felt so liberated. I was like, oh, do you mean like I can actually eat some cereal from time to time and I don't need to feel guilty about it? Or I can eat rice? And, like I had just developed this really unhealthy relationship with certain foods. So that was a huge improvement. But on top of that, I started actually leaning out more, meaning I finally looked like I was working out. And nowadays, like I hear that so often, that people are like, I'm active, I eat well, but I don't look like it. Like, why does my body not look like I'm actually putting in all the work and so on? And that's exactly how I felt. But I started showing more definition, started performing better, sleeping better, because carbs also influence how well we sleep, how well we manage our stress and so on. And so from that moment on, I basically decided I want to teach as many people as possible that you don't need to over restrict yourself in certain food groups, that you can actually have this food freedom and technically eat what you want to eat. You just can't eat as much of that as you want to eat. You need to learn how to balance things out properly. So let's say if you are going on date night and you want to share a pizza with your partner and a glass of wine, maybe you will have just a salad and chicken for lunch, and maybe a lighter breakfast as well, to kind of like balance out the carbs and the proteins and the fats in that meal. So that is kind of my journey into nutrition coaching. I know that was not specifically your question. Your question was more about the growing up, but it's kind of led me into that.
No, I mean, we're diving right into it. So I have a question myself, and I'm sure all the listeners too, because I struggled with this. So I had a hormonal imbalance when I was starting at the age of 12, and ever since, like it fluctuated, and then as a result of that, my menstruation kind of got affected by that, right? And of course, it's easy for me to gain weight, and it's hard for me to lose weight. But then when I control my intake, like what you said, then and without restricting myself from the things that I actually love to eat, I could see that I am working on the body, even though I'm not like, even when I intentionally place I have the intention of working out like day in and day out, it doesn't really show that much of a definition. So I guess my question here is, how do we know what we need in terms of our calories, and what are the factors affecting weight? Like the body composition is so much more than just weight, right? There's muscle mass, there's fat composition, there's every other thing, your water retention and those things. So yeah, can you help
Yeah,
us?
that's a really great question. And I love that you shared the thing about your food affecting your hormonal health, your period as well, because obviously that's something that most women have experienced or see in some way, shape, or form. So, for instance, we see that very clearly in the research. If we over restrict foods, especially carbs also. And if we over exercise, often that leads to something which is called hypothalamic amenorrhea. Basically, your period stops showing up altogether. It just means that your body is so stressed from not receiving enough food, from overtraining, that it doesn't think that it's a safe environment to create a baby, and therefore it's not really having your hormones in a balanced way. That is often like the one extreme. The other extreme, of course, is also if people are of too high of a body fat percentage, if they're maybe not exercising at all, and then they might be estrogen dominant and kind of like more in that, maybe even with some symptoms of PCOS or endometriosis in that kind of area. So what we do find is that we don't want to be in an over or an extreme body fat percentage. We also don't want to be in a very low body fat percentage. So our hormones really like kind of that healthy slash normal range. And the same applies to exercise. So not over exercising, not being completely sedentary.
Are you stuck in a job that you don't love, feeling like you're meant for more? It is not in your head, it is in your soul. I am Nick Yaras, and I help high achievers like you break free from burnout, rewire self-doubt, and build a life aligned with purpose through coaching, hypnotherapy, and soul activation. Because let's face it, real wealth isn't just about money, it is about a aligned and happy heart, mind, and soul. Now, remember, you are worthy and you are enough. Let's transform your life together. Visit www.thenickyaras.holisticlifestyle.com to begin.
Now, to your question in regards to how many calories should we actually eat or how much do we need? Of course, that is 1,000,000% dependent on each individual because we all are of a different height, different age. We have a different dieting history. It even matters how many diets have you done in the past because your metabolism is going to be different if you have gone through very many diets before than if you've never done a diet and this is the very first time you're trying to lose weight. So the very best way to actually figure that out, what works best for you, in my opinion, and that is what I start working with or how I start working with my clients as well. We just recommend them to record what they're currently eating. So starting to weigh out your food and enter that in a food tracking app. Nowadays, it's very easy. There are so many apps out there. 20 years ago, everybody had to like calculate their own food kind of thing. But now things like MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, My Macros, Carbon Diet, they all allow you to enter your food. I would just recommend that you actually weigh your food out because a lot of people just kind of like guesstimate, oh, this is a bagel. But, like how big is the bagel? Is it 60 grams? Is it 100 grams? So like
Humongous.
try to be accurate so that you actually get an accurate reading. Alongside of that, also making sure that we're kind of tracking your weight for a couple of weeks on a day-to-day basis so that we see fluctuations. And at the end of that, you will see, okay, I actually maintained my weight over the course of these 2 weeks. And on average, I was eating 1,900 or 2,000 calories. That means this is somewhere within my maintenance range. If your weight goes up with what you're eating, then you're probably a little bit above. That means you're in a calorie surplus. If your weight goes down throughout that time, you are in a calorie deficit, so less calories going in than what you are burning. Now, of course, how do we manipulate that or find that out a little bit more scientifically? There are a ton of calculations online, and you can even Google calorie calculator, and they will usually ask you for the basic data. So let's just say again, height, age, activity level. So how many times a week do you exercise? How many steps do you get per day, that kind of thing. And they will give you a rough number, which for most people can actually be a reasonably good target. So I would recommend finding out how much you just need to maintain right now, because the mistake that a lot of people make is they think, I want to lose weight. Okay, I'm going to go on a diet. And they just like, there's many meal plans or so out there, and they're just generically giving you 1,200 calories, for instance. And for most people, that is way, way, way too aggressive. And that is one of the reasons why they can't maintain it. And then it results into a negative relationship with dieting and always thinking, oh, I fail at that. Weight loss is hard. It's difficult. And we start developing all these limiting beliefs around weight loss. Whereas if you approach it in a much more moderate way, and you just say, okay, I have now logically or scientifically found out that my maintenance calories is somewhere between 1900 and 2100. That's kind of where my weight is going to be somewhat stable. Of course, we're always going to have day-to-day fluctuations, but roughly around that point. And now I want to lose a little bit of weight. I'm going to give myself enough time, not just 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I'm going to say, okay, I want to lose 10 kilos. So I'm going to give myself at least 20 weeks or 4 to 5 months type of thing. That would be a moderate approach to it. And I'm going to drop my calories just by 250 or 300. And maybe I will add an extra training session or increase my steps from 6,000 to 10,000 and just really focus on the habits and being consistent with what I'm doing in order to make that a new or part of my new personality, because that is the other point to it. Most people just think, I want to lose the weight. And as soon as they have lost it, they go back to their previous ways of eating. Of course, that means yo-yo dieting, because if we don't have a plan for after the diet, we're just going to intuitively eat and most of the time, and that means our body's going to send us all the signals to regain the weight. It doesn't actually want us to lose the weight. Our body, like from a survival perspective, just wants us to keep the weight on because it's safety, right? If you have a little bit of extra cushion, extra body fat, technically for survival purposes, that is safety. So what we need to do after a diet is gradually increasing the calories again to our maintenance level, and then making sure we're not actually overeating, because again, you will have higher hunger signals after a diet. Your body wants you to gain the weight back. So if you are gradually increasing, let's just say you cut your calories by those 300 that we were talking about, meaning you were trying to eat 1650 or 1700 calories for your calorie deficit for your weight loss phase. So maybe the next week, once you have reached your goal weight, you might just increase it up to 1800. Your body will probably love the extra fuel and just really use it for hormone optimization. You might feel more energized, but you won't put on any weight. Maybe 2 weeks after that, you will increase to 1900, making sure your body weight stays the same. And then maybe a week later, you will increase to 2000 and you're back at your maintenance level, and your body, your metabolism has been taught to, okay, we're being well fed again. I don't need to send for extra hunger signals.
Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait. Your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now.
Because also the other danger is that people, when they get to the end of their dieting phase and they reach their goal weight, they're so afraid of adding any extra food. They're just staying at this low calorie level from that point onwards. And that's really, really not good for hormones, for metabolism. And that can often result into that like lack of period or period dysregulation if we're just constantly under fueling. So really important after your dieting phase, you want to make sure you are increasing your calories again. This is called reverse dieting. So just gradually increasing the calories. And the second part of your question was with regards to body composition and what we actually need to eat in terms of the calories. So that's a really, really, really great point that you're mentioning, because of course, actually, when we talk about weight loss, most people mean fat loss, because you don't want to lose fat and muscle or just muscle.
Yes.
That would mean you just look skinny fat at the end of it. And who wants to look skinny fat at the end of a diet? We've all seen these people. Most of the time, they're people that only do, like, they might go running and they lost some weight. They just look like a kind of like a boat where you took the air out of, like these things that people take to the pool or so, just a little bit less, a weaker version of yourself. You don't want to be that. Most of us, we want to look defined, we want to look shaped, we want to look toned. And in order to do that, the two most effective strategies really to achieve that is, number one, some form of resistance training. And when I say resistance training, that can be any kind of resistance. So it might be body weight exercises, might be strength training in the gym, it might be with bands, with dumbbells, with kettlebells. Any kind of like resistance that you're working with is going to stimulate muscle growth, or at least when you're in a dieting phase, at least muscle maintenance. And that's really what we want, because if we do that, then we are increasing the chances that most of the weight that you lose come from body fat and only very small amount from fat, if any. And the second most important strategy in order to maintain that lean body mass is to eat sufficient amount of protein. So when I say protein, a lot of people just think a protein really is just if you want to be big and muscular. It's just for those bodybuilders that you need to pay attention to that. But proteins are really the building blocks of all of our body. So they're building blocks of our hair, of our nails, of our joints, of our tendons, literally everything. And so we want to make sure we're eating enough protein to maintain the muscle that we have, and also to help our body in that state of low calories to still thrive, to still look radiant and not like exhausted and feeling low in energy and tired all the time. And I guess to add to that, just in terms of bonuses for protein is also the macronutrients. So the other two macronutrients being carbs and fats. It is the macronutrient which is the least likely to be stored as body fat, just from a physiological perspective. So the chemical makeup of protein would have to be transcribed a lot more, or have to be processed a lot more to be stored as body fat than carbs or fats. Over-consuming fat is a lot easier for the body to store as body fat, because it's technically very similar, like the fat that we eat and the fat that we store from a structural makeup, very similar. Carbs are also pretty easy to be stored as body fat or to be transcribed. Protein, not so much. So there are a few or several studies actually that show that people that eat or increase their calories just through protein, they don't put on or hardly put on any body fat. Whereas if people increase the same amount of calories from carbs or fats, they are almost always going to put it on as body fat if it goes beyond their maintenance calories, obviously. And apart from that, other benefits when it comes to protein is that it's very satiating. So if we eat the same amount of calories, let's just say a tablespoon of olive oil has about 130 calories. Tablespoon of olive oil is not very much. You put that in your mouth, you're not going to feel super satiated after that. If you eat like a chicken breast, literally chicken breast, or an egg white omelet that also has 120 calories, you're going to feel satiated maybe for an hour or two. So a lot longer, because your body needs more time to break that down than with the fat or the carbs. So lots of reasons for people to eat more protein. Unfortunately, in our normal diet, it is always very easy to come about carbs and fats. So you will find bread or cookies, muffins, that kind of stuff, basically everywhere. But if we want to go about or find more lean protein, lean meaning low in fat content, it's a lot harder. So if you just think of like your trip today, you flew in from somewhere, if you think of all the airport foods there, you probably found maybe some peanuts, some nuts, some chips, some whatever else they offer. But thinking about, okay, was there any eggs? Was there any chicken? Was there any low-fat yogurt? Was there any, all these fresh things? Probably a lot harder. So we often need to go more about we need to be a little bit more planned out. And sometimes, especially when traveling, things like protein powder or protein bars can help. I do always say they're not necessary. So if someone says to me, Lisa, I don't want to use any supplements or minimal supplements, really, do I need to eat protein powder? No, not at all. You can get your requirements through natural foods as well, but protein powders and bars can help initially, especially if we're not huge meat eaters or if there's not a lot of fish or so in our diet also. And so to make that more specifically for the listeners as well, once you have established your maintenance calories or your calorie target, the next thing is then to set a protein target. And on average, it's easiest to think about it, okay, what's my goal weight? And then using that in pounds and as grams of protein. So let's just say you might be currently 160 pounds. So that is roughly, I don't know, 70 kilos, 73 kilos, something like that. And if your goal weight is 130, so maybe 63 kilos or so, your goal protein number would be 130 grams. That's a good place to shoot for. And so the minimum I would like to see, because some people, especially if they're vegan, vegetarian, they do have hard time reaching that goal, the minimum I would usually like to see is 0.7 times goal body weight. So for that same individual, that might be about 100 grams of protein or so. So now the next point that people probably think about is, okay, how much is that actually? And that is why I do recommend using these food trackers, because it can be very eye-opening in the sense of which foods are actually high in protein. Sometimes we think, oh, I have an egg in my breakfast, that is plenty. Well, an egg has like 7 grams of protein. So if you think 7 and your goal is 130, you either need to eat 5 eggs for breakfast, which is not ideal probably, or you might have to add some egg whites to that. You might have to find some protein bread instead of regular bread to add to that, or maybe you want to have a protein shake beforehand or add something else, or maybe you want to really make sure that you're eating a good amount of chicken in your lunch then to compensate for the lower protein breakfast. So that's just something that you will learn once you start recording your food. You're realizing the foods that you probably thought were really high in protein maybe are not that high in protein. I, for instance, used to believe when I came to this, I was like, peanut butter is a good source of protein. We sometimes hear that, or I don't know if you've heard that, or some listeners as well, but I certainly thought that. And I realized a tablespoon of peanut butter has like 130 calories. So first of all, it's pretty high in calories. That doesn't mean it's bad or good. It just means it's something we want to kind of limit, and instead of eat out of the jar, as some people do sometimes. But also on top of that, it only has like 3 or 4 grams of protein. So it is by far not a good source of protein. So this is something what we will learn, every time you log a food, you're like, oh, wow, this is actually a lot higher, a lot lower in calories or protein than I thought. And it's just really like an eye-opening learning experience, at the end of which you walk away with just a really good understanding of how to compose your meals in order to make them not just balanced, but also in order to make you feel satiated and full and energized afterwards. I will try to do my best. Yes, I'm always a little bit go into details, but yes, I mean sugar. So again, I came from a place of being terrified of sugar. I think where I have landed now is that I highly recommend people limit added sugars, for example, especially in beverages and drinks, so like sodas and so on, switching to diet soda, or making sure that you're adding, let's say, stevia or other sweeteners to your coffee instead of regular sugar, because the truth of the matter is it is not going to require a lot of digesting. So meaning there is no fiber in there. It's not going to be very satiating, especially if you drink it. You're basically drinking empty calories and not necessarily noticing it. On top of that, if we drink something sugary or eat something sugary, without adding any carbs and fats to that, healthy carbs and fats, we're going to be spiking our blood sugar quite a bit here, and then it's going to give us a drop off quite quickly also. So meaning you might feel energized for half an hour, and then after that you feel like, oh, I want to take a nap. Like that whole thing where people either they have a big lunch or they eat a muffin or something like that for lunch, like something sugary, and then half an hour later you're like, oh, I'm so sleepy, I need my next energy fix, and then they go and grab a coffee and another sweet or so.
Sometimes.
So yeah, it is such a vicious cycle. And so what we can do, number one, again, like I said, limiting the added sugars to things. I do always want to be mindful of not fear mongering and saying like, hey, you can never have anything sugary, but it is about the things that we do on a regular basis. So I want to say, try to avoid starting your day with something sugary, and make sure that it actually does contain some fiber, some protein, and healthy fats. So it could be a low-fat Greek yogurt that is high in protein with some berries, which are high in fiber, maybe adding some almond butter to that, or having some oats in there, like some overnight oats. That's a brilliant breakfast. Or your egg white omelet with a nice piece of sourdough bread and some vegetables. That's also a really great breakfast, instead of the muffin or just a toast and jam or so, which is basically carbs and sugar. So we want to avoid that. We also want to avoid just having sugary things on an empty stomach. So let's just say, again, in the afternoon, that's often where people feel like they have a crash and they quote unquote crave sweets. If we try to mindfully place some like protein bars, or maybe it could be low-fat cottage cheese with some veggies, or even just a boiled egg as a snack is actually a great source as well. Instead of going for the sugar right there, you're going to have much more steady energy levels over the rest of the day. Now, if you say, hey, I love my afternoon break where I have a cup of tea, or in the morning I love my coffee, can I have a piece of dark chocolate with that or so? Absolutely. Like everything in moderation, I'm totally up for that if you work it into your calorie budget, and if it's not something where you're like, I'm eating this out of emotional eating, because oftentimes the reason why we crave that sugar is because we're overly stressed or because we are frustrated. And it's just such a quick fix of like a dopamine rush and getting us to calm down. So I do try to encourage people to think about like when they feel like, oh no, I feel guilty, I ate this and that. In order to eliminate those guilty feelings, we want to just bring awareness to, okay, why do you think you were craving that? Was it because you were rushing from one point to another all day long and you didn't take 5 minutes for yourself? Yeah, probably, maybe that, especially if you're a busy mom or if you have a family, a lot of obligations. That is often, we don't pause just because we think we deserve it. We only pause if we have a reason to. And so sometimes food gives us a reason to. But I often say, okay, can we, in that instance, when you notice that, can we just slow down and maybe take 3 deep breaths? And if after those 3 deep breaths, and you drink some water or so, you still feel like you really, really want something to eat, think about it first. Like, have you had enough protein and fiber today? If the answer is no, maybe eat a proper meal first and then allow yourself to have the chocolate or whatever it is. And if you say, no, I've already had a good meal, I still crave that sugar, then again, make sure you sit down, you actually take the time and enjoy every single bite of what you're eating, so that afterwards, an hour or two later, you can truly say, I enjoyed that, and not in the sense of like, I feel guilty about it. Or sometimes we eat something and we don't pay attention. Like we scroll at the same time, we watch some TV or so, and we think about, where did my muffin go? I thought I still had some left. It's all gone. Where
I
did
thought
that
I
go?
had
Like I've
about
been there.
16 squares of the chocolate, and then now I only have 8 left. I ate half
Yeah,
of it
exactly.
in like 10
So that
minutes.
is, for me, that is the opposite of mindful eating. So I just want to encourage people to be more mindful, and also to be more to make conscious decisions. And when you truly make conscious decisions, that means afterwards you never feel guilty, because even if you're in a diet and maybe one day you ate more than you planned, at least then you said, that was really worth it. I had such an awesome date night with my husband. He cooked for me and he made me my favorite dessert, tiramisu. I didn't want to say no, and it was worth every single bite. If you can say that, then I, as your coach, I would be like, that's amazing. It's absolutely fine that, the next day your scale weight was up a little bit, probably was mostly because of water retention from higher salt or so. Anyway, don't stress about it. You enjoyed it. Next day, we're just moving on, getting back to the instead of over
Yes.
restricting or punishing ourselves for a decision that we weren't happy with.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we have 8 minutes now. Lisa, I would love to have you on for another episode if you don't mind.
I would
You
love
know,
that. Thank you so
yeah, there's so
much.
much to dive into about nutrition, and I myself is in the wellness space, and so this is something that I'm working on with some people. Okay, okay, I'm just gonna pivot to a self-worth question because we're gonna have to close it off right now. So the question for you, Lisa, many people struggle with feelings of worthlessness at some point in their lives. Now, have you ever had this before? And what were some of your common triggers for these feelings, and how did you cope with it?
Great question. I want to make sure I understood it correctly. You said with self-worthlessness. Was that the
Yes.
question? Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, I will be
Worthlessness.
complete. Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. I love it. And I will say I struggle with it, to be honest, probably almost on a daily basis, in a small amount, not to the sense of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I don't know anything. No, but of course, with social media, as you know, there's always people that do more, that produce more, that are more knowledgeable, that seem more professional. And so even though I try very hard to contain my window and not consume too much content, especially not of people that would make me feel in that kind of way, nonetheless, I'm also someone who's, I would say, like type A and high achiever. So I do set goals very high. And over the last few years, I've worked really hard on letting go a little bit and not having those expectations as much. My upbringing in Germany as well was very much, doing focused and outcome focused. And only if you produce good grades, you're worth a lot. Only if you show up in this and that way, you're worth a lot. And so I have really had to detach from that. For instance, yesterday, I will be completely transparent. Yesterday, I had a day, I had things going on maybe until midday, until noon or so. And in the afternoon, I literally had nothing on my calendar. That hasn't happened in I don't know how long. And I was just like, okay, I'm gonna actually try to enjoy this. Like there were several moments where like I should be doing stuff. And I told myself, I'm not going to, Lisa, stop doing things just for the sake of doing things. You need to like appreciate where you are, what your business has allowed you to do, that you have an entire afternoon of just doing
Exactly. Oh
nothing. So
my
I was
God,
trying to take a
yes.
nap. I went and got my coffee, all these things. And at the end of it, still, I felt a little bit unsatisfied in the sense of
You're not
unproductiveness, but
productive.
I felt
Yes.
satisfied at the same time because I did quote unquote make myself enjoy that instead of leaning into my initial instinct of like, I need to be doing stuff. I'm just going to write another email. I'm going to write another thing. So yeah, it's a learning process.
I love it. Well, thank you for being transparent. I too battle with that every day, but I think when you progress beats perfection, and I think we all deserve that compassion towards ourselves because we know of our potential
Yes,
and we want to be that or even more than what we have planned for ourselves. So thank you for the
absolutely.
Lisa. So how can people reach out to you?
Yes, absolutely. I would love for people to get in touch if they enjoyed our first interview. I hope there will be a few to come. So as you mentioned at the beginning, my business name is Nutrition Coaching and Life, and that's also the handle that I use on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. Nutrition Coaching and Life, everything is the same. And the name of my podcast is the Nutrition and Life Podcast.
Brilliant. Well, okay. Any last message for our listeners, Lisa, before we wrap up this first interview of ours?
I just want to say that if you're listening to this and you're feeling discontent in your body, if you just feel like there has to be a different way, I know that I can look differently or feel differently, I'm just feeling kind of stuck, I would really want to encourage you to not settle for that feeling, to not settle for just what you've always done because you've always done it or because everyone around you is doing it. Every one of us, each person listening, has the potential to really tap into greatness and to improve on where they are right now. Even if it's already good, we can always improve. And I would just really want to encourage people to strive for optimization rather than settling for mediocrity.
Oh, I love that. That hit me to the core. Well, that is a wrap on today's inspiring episode with Lisa Franz. Thank you, Lisa, for the work that you do and for uplifting others around you. For our listeners, this has been Your Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, if you've ever felt worthless, remember you're not alone. Your soul chose to be here to matter. And for that reason alone, you are worthy.
My pleasure.
Love this episode? Now, transformation doesn't end here. Head on to at holistic.lifestyle_with Nick. That is on my Instagram. Or head on to my website, www.denigneras.holisticlifestyle.blog for more info on my coaching framework, which is the worthy, authentic, and abundant framework, digital guides, and my upcoming events such as retreats and master classes and workshops. Now, I also do intuitive readings where we get to check on your soul path. And if you're also wanting to check on your energetic alignment, I have done that too. And I offer that kind of services. So, my question to you is, are you ready? Because I am. Let's create your next. Hi, Lisa. Good morning to you. How are you doing today?
I'm really, really well. Thank you so much for having me on, Nick.
Well, thank you so much for saying yes to be interviewed today. I'd like to introduce myself to you formally and to all of our listeners. Tuning in for the first time or returning subscribers, my name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, today we're going to talk about science-based fat loss strategy and focus on building a toned look, something that I strive to achieved for at least the better part of my life. And what better way to have to discuss this than with an expert herself. So we have Lisa Franz here with us. Lisa is the owner and head coach at Nutrition Coaching and Life and host of the Nutrition and Life podcast. Now, after struggling through various diets herself, she learned about the evidence-based ways to change weight and body composition and has been fascinated with nutrition and building muscle ever since. Okay, now I'm gonna dive right into it. But first, Lisa, can you first share with us what was it like growing up as a Lisa Franz?